What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here. I am the host of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And I'm here with Ron Diamond. I'm going to introduce him formally in a second. Ron, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. One of the interesting one lately, the co-founder of Pixar on, he talked about kind of the inception of Pixar and just some early George Lucas stories, Steve Jobs stories. So check that out and many other episodes there. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. You know, for me, Ron, I'm always looking at ways to give to my relationships. And I found no better way to give to my relationships than to profile them, to shout from the rooftops, their story, what they're doing, what they're working on the podcast. So if you haven't thought about it, check it out. Go to rise25.com. And I'm excited, and big shout out to Stu Wolf, who's a business coach, certified EOS implementer in Michigan, fellow leader in Tiger 21 organization like Ron. So thanks, Stu. Ron Diamond is the founder and CEO of Diamond Wealth, which is a holistic financial advisory firm catering to the unique needs of over 100 single family offices, ranging in size from 250 million to 330 billion. Their company helps single family offices navigate the entire spectrum of investments and includes, advice on investments in private equity, real estate, venture capital. What's cool, Ron, about your company is you have an investment banking division, you have a private investment division, you have an environmental social governance division, and a philanthropy division, which actually is led by the former head of Oprah Winfrey Foundation's president of Crown Family Philanthropies, and you're also a chair of Tiger 21. So Ron, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You know, what I love to start off with, and I've listened to several interviews, you also talk about a lot about giving value first. So I love to hear your philosophy, because people think, well, how did you break into this world of family offices?
It was a bit serendipitous. So my background, I graduated from Northwestern. I worked at Drexel Burnham when Drexel Burnham existed. And after 2 years, they imploded. And I'm in the room with people in their 60s and 70s and literally they're weeping. Many of them lost all their money. And my takeaway from that was I would always be loyal to people, but I would never be loyal to a company, because if that could happen to Drexel, it could happen to anybody. So I came back to Chicago, started a hedge fund, ran about 250 million for 10 years, sold it, took some time off and started investing. So I got into the family office world. It was very serendipitous. And with the hedge fund, they didn't call them family offices. They would call them family offices today. They used to call them rich people. So there were a bunch of rich people who are now called family offices. And that's kind of how I got into this space. So after I sold my company, I started making some investments. And I figured if I put in a little bit and I could get other people to invest more, I'll get better deal flow and execution. So that's basically what I started to do. And that's how I got into the business.
And, you all talk a lot about giving first and providing value. What are some of the ways that you've done this and thought about it throughout your career?
Well, it's different. I think, I'm 57. So I think when you're, you look at life through a different lens, I think when you're younger. So I didn't look at life through the same lens I do today. And I did things a lot differently, more myopic when I was younger. I don't know when, it wasn't a turning point or something, but I just realized that if you're going to, so many people are looking to receive, to get stuff. And so few people are going to give. And I remember one story, there was somebody who's like, I was talking to him on the phone and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll hook you up with those people. And I introduced him to those two people. And he called me up. He's like, I can't believe you introduced me to them. I'm like, why? I told you I would. He's like, yeah, but everybody says they would and they don't. And I think the problem is that we live in a society where everyone wants to get. And at the end of the day, I'm not only altruistic. I mean, everybody's looking to get, myself included. But in order to get, you need to give. And there's a term called a go-getter. There's also a term called a go-giver. And a go-giver is somebody who's really going out of his way to figure out ways to help people, and it will come back in spades. I can't tell you how, but it always does. So how I've worked probably for the last 20 years is usually when I do something that benefits somebody without any thought of how it's going to impact me, somehow, some way, somewhere, it helps me down the road. It just does. I can't explain it, but it does.
Funny, because there was a group call that was recorded, and they were asking you, how do you connect with these family offices? And you were giving them advice on, giving, making introductions. And you said something that was, I thought, interesting. You said, even if I have an amazing deal for them, I don't present it right away at all. Like, I just want to deliver as much value as possible and not even present it off the bat at all.
Right. Look, there's always going to be great deals. I mean, there's always a fantastic deal that you need to be in. But at the end of the day, what I've done, how I've built my business, I've just surrounded myself with people that are smarter than me in various areas that I can trust implicitly. And if you surround yourself and you delegate, and if you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you in various areas that you trust implicitly, good things happen. So that's really how I've built my business, just surrounding myself. And I did that. I'm now doing it. I'm on the Family Office Initiative at Stanford University. Again, it just figuring out ways where you could add value, and then value comes back. It comes back to you.
One of the things that you've talked about too is the family office space being a bit fragmented and providing value that way. Can you talk about that fragmentation, how you've kind of helped to solve it?
Well, I don't know that I've solved it. We're trying to solve it at Stanford, but what's happening is that family offices in general are fragmented, inefficient, and siloed. So when you hear the term family office, everyone thinks it's something different. I was giving a lecture at Stanford. I had $5 billion family offices on a podium, and I said, "What's a family office and why did you create it?" And they were 5 totally different answers. And none of them were wrong and none of them were right. They were just different answers. And that's the area with this industry. So if you think about it, family offices, there's roughly 17,000 family offices in the world. And again, that's a ballpark. There's roughly $10 trillion in capital. There's 65 trillion coming downstream from the baby boomers, the next gen in the next 15 years. So this market will be bigger than the private equity and venture capital markets combined. Having said that, most of the money, people who've got family offices, many of them, not all of them, but most of them are inefficient, fragmented, and siloed. Because think about it, where did they make their money? They sold Beanie Babies. They sold Guess jeans. They sold Giorgio perfume, 5 Hour Energy, chain of gas stations, and they have a liquidity event. It's a completely different skill set to do that, which is great, than to take $500 million, grow it to $1 billion, not spoil the kids, do some wealth transfer, do some philanthropy, and grow the asset base. So you've got huge amounts of capital in what I'd call, in general, very inefficient hands. And the family offices, all of a sudden, if 68% of family offices started since 2000 and half of those started since the crash of 2008, it's a new phenomenon. And since 2008 until today, everything's gone up. Private equity, venture capital, real estate, Bitcoin, I don't care what you invested in, it's worked. And family offices right now have one hand on their ear and one hand on their wallet because that's where the money is. And the problem is that they just want to be able to talk to other families without being sold. They want to get real advice. So many service providers, and again, there's nothing wrong with being a service provider for anything, but they want to sell them insurance. They want to sell them real estate. They want to sell them into their private equity fund. They want to sell them into their hedge fund. They want to sell them with their whatever it is. And they need to slow down because the model doesn't work. I mean, what people don't fully understand is only 25% of family offices make it to the second generation, 10 make it to the third, and 5 make it to the fourth. So the whole model, like everyone wants to be a family office, it doesn't work. So what we're trying to create at Stanford is an ecosystem whereby we can help. We're not a panacea, but where we can help these families network and collaborate in an area where they're not being sold product and people don't have other ulterior agendas.
To me, when you say those numbers, Ron, I feel like they should be bigger, like the transfer of wealth, that percentage. Why is it so small, and how can people increase that?
65 trillion is not small. It's the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world.
I mean, the 5%, like you're saying,
Okay.
yeah, that is small. Like, when you get to the third generation,
right.
It's, yeah.
So the reason is several-fold. Because what happens is when somebody has a liquidity event and sells their company, what do they want to do? They want to invest in a cool cannabis deal or private equity or venture capital or real estate deal. What should they do? Talk to an estate planning attorney. Because without proper planning, nothing else makes it. It doesn't matter. You can make more money planning than you can investing. People don't fully understand that. So the family offices that fully get it, they're really in bed with their estate planning attorney. That's the very first, second, and third thing you need to do is get it structured. Without the proper structure, which is like the foundation of a house, it'll fall apart. And I think the reason is people are so focused on creating alpha, which is fine, making investments. And that's what I do, trying to make money in private equity or venture capital and real estate. But they have to have the structure down first. And they're very myopic and they don't think about it long term. And the money's relatively new because this industry, again, it goes back to way past Rockefeller and Vanderbilt. But most of the family office industry, the way most of your listeners have heard it, has been in the past 20 years. So it is new. And people are focusing on making money rather than taking a step back and figuring out how do I make it. And things like succession, next gen, impact investing, philanthropy, the soft skills, those are the skills that really help, not just picking out the best private equity deal.
Yeah. So they're focused on the sexy making money and not the foundational pieces. You mentioned the estate planning. What are some of the other foundational pieces that you're like, listen, before we go down this avenue, I'll find you the best cannabis deal out there. You need to put these things in place.
Well, I think I always start with the estate planning attorney because you need that as a structure. The estate planning attorney needs to be working closely with the accountant. So what you really need to do is once you have had a liquidity event, you're a quarterback or you're a conductor. And as a conductor, you don't have to know all the tax laws or all the accounting laws or all these different rules, but you do have to know how everything works together. And what I tell people once they have a liquidity event is, look, you are now the conductor. Your estate planning attorney knows a lot more about you than estate planning. Your accountant, and he should, your accountant knows a lot more about you than accounting. But you need to figure out how things work together and you're quarterbacking it. And if you don't quarterback it and you let them lead, then the estate planning attorney is going to be fighting with the accountant. The accountant is going to be fighting with this person. It's your game, and you have to grow this like a business. So most of the people who are family offices who've created the wealth, they built a business. Now, when you sell your company and you're worth a lot of money, in order to make it work, you have to, this family office, it is a business. It's not, I've got a lot of money now, I'm just going to invest. You can do whatever you want with it. But if you want it to last 2, 3, 4 generations or further, you have to think further along. So that's the main thing I focus on with people.
So in the liquidity event, we'll call it the liquidity event team. Someone should have the estate planning. They should have accountant. Everyone's communicating together, and then also someone who helps run the investments.
Well, even before the liquidity event. So, and this is the problem. So all these people, they're really good at making widgets, right? So they're good at making widgets and they sell their widget company. But what they should have done, and they didn't know about this because they've got blinders on, is they should have talked to an estate planning attorney probably a year before they even signed an LOI. Because once you sign an LOI, you set a valuation of it, and then you can't do a lot of things that you can do with discount valuations the estate planning attorneys can do. So in theory, what you want to do is educate these people before they even have a liquidity event. That's where you can get maximum value. 9 out of 10 times what happens is people sell their company, say, okay, now I'm wealthy, now I want to do estate planning. Well, the estate planning can help you, but they could probably do 1/4 of what they could have done had you spoken to them prior to your LOI.
Love that. Yeah. And one of the things you talk about is with the investment piece, it's not even always looking at making the most amount of money, but there's a legacy piece as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, look, I think that right now, you call it a bubble. I don't know what you call it. All I can tell you is these valuations are insane, right? I mean, you look at private equity, venture capital. I mean, people are paying stupid money for companies. This will not continue forever. How long? I don't know. And the government can't afford to print money forever. So this is like, I don't think this can last. So I think that what families need to do is figure out, what do they do really well and what do they like to do? So let's say they made their money in real estate. Fine, they handle the real estate, but then outsource the other stuff. The venture capital, that's not what they know. The private equity, the cannabis, whatever it is, outsource the stuff you don't know or you're not that good at. Keep in line, focus on what you do know and you're really best at, and grow it that way. And the biggest, I think, impediment many of these families have, truthfully, is the ego of the founder. And once you can get the ego, you can transcend the ego and you can look at it from the standpoint of, yes, this guy knows more about me than private equity. It's not that he's smarter than me, just that he's been doing it, then things could work. So it's interesting. But when people say, well, who's your biggest competitor? Oftentimes I'll say it's you.
They want to do it themselves.
They want to do it themselves. And you could be good at something. I'm like, look, when you built your business, were you in charge of sales? No, I had the best sales guy. So why are you going to do this any different? So it's just the way you look at it. And it's got to be looked at like a business. But if it's looked at like a business, you can really scale it. And it's fun because, again, this is so new. And right now, everybody's trying to get into the family office business because that's where all the money is. So banks are setting up family office divisions. Accounting firms are trying to set up. Law firms are setting up. They're all setting up because that's where the money is. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you're only in the second inning. And I think my belief, my thesis at Stanford is that I believe that as family offices, as private equity and venture capital disrupted the public markets in the early 80s because it was a better model, family offices are starting to and will ultimately disrupt the public market or the private equity and venture capital, because private equity and venture capital have become an AUM game. They just try to aggregate as much money as possible, and they're making the money in the 2%, not necessarily the 20%. So there's an inherent conflict of interest. And what family offices have is something called patient capital. And patient capital meaning they're not incented to flip a company every 3 to 5 years like the private equity and the venture capital firms are. So there's much better alignment of interest. And when I go back to everybody, I always say, let's look at alignment of interest. If there's alignment of interest, then everything can work out in the end. Without alignment of interest, somehow, somewhere along the line, something's going to fall apart. And that's what happened with private equity and venture capital. Still huge markets, and I'm still a huge proponent of the industries. But in many instances, for the entrepreneur, your partner is much better off being a family office than a private equity or venture capital firm.
Ron, what I find fascinating is the different divisions of your company. And I'd love to hear about the evolution of services. Can you talk about, were there certain ones that came first with divisions and the rest came later? How did it evolve into the different divisions?
Well, first was investing because that's what I did and that's what I knew how to do. But then as I started learning what family offices were doing, and then I kind of took a step back and realized, well, if only 25% are making it to second generation, why is that? So one of the things I found was, philanthropy is really important. Not all, but most family offices are philanthropic. Some are extremely philanthropic. And, my North Star is, my father passed from prostate cancer at 57, which is how old I am. When my first boss was Michael Milken. When Milken went to jail, he developed prostate cancer. And when he got out of jail, rather than spending $100 million into the American Cancer Society, he built it like a VC fund. So people like you and me and all the male listeners will die with, but not of, prostate cancer, primarily because of Michael Milken. So I don't think you can run a charity exactly like a business. And you look at what Gates did for vaccines, but you can run it more business-like. So my North Star is figuring out ways to take these family offices, these entrepreneurs who've created these huge companies, take that skill set and use it to solve some of the real world problems, be it climate, be it education, be it poverty, whatever it is. And I think that we can do.
I love that. Yeah. And sorry about your dad. That's thinking about the North Star in general for anyone is really an important thing to do. Last question, Ron. I want to also, before I ask it, point people to where people can find out more online. Where should we point people to learn more about you?
I don't really, I appreciate that. I mean, look, I've got a website in LinkedIn, but I'm not really looking for people to reach out to me so much. if I could add value, I'm fairly busy with everything that I'm doing right now. So,
well, they could go to your podcast page, listen to some of your podcasts. And,
I know my producer would be killing me when he. So yeah, I've got a podcast. The website is Diamond Wealth Strategies. So,
thank you. Yeah. Go to Diamond Wealth Strategies. You can go on YouTube and type in Ron Diamond Wealth Strategies. He's got some amazing content out there in addition to this. Last question, Ron, you are about giving. When I hear you talk, you are about, really helping connect people. I love for you to talk about Tiger 21, your role there and kind of what you've learned through Tiger 21.
I never heard of Tiger 21 5 years ago. I was approached to be a member 3 years ago, and then I never followed up. And then about 2 years ago, I was asked to be the chair. Tiger 21 is an incredible organization. And I never did YPO or Vistage because I didn't understand it. Even though a lot of my friends were in it when I was younger and they loved it, I just thought, okay, I know I do fairly well. I don't need to tell everybody how well I do. And that's kind of what I thought those organizations were. And I was completely wrong. Tiger 21 is great because it's a peer-to-peer network. And I never understood the value of peer-to-peer networks, but they're phenomenal. And what they do is nobody has an agenda. You've got, I'm really good at this, but I suck at these 4 things. Well, maybe some of these other people can help me with the 4 things that I'm not very good at. And so what Tiger enables me to do is to work. It's like a personal board of advisors, and it enables me to talk to people knowing they don't have an agenda. They're not really trying to sell me insurance or trying to get me to invest in their real estate fund. They've got my best interest at heart. And you've got people that care about each other. And it's mind-boggling when you get beyond the surface. I've got for my meetings, I've got the picture of the iceberg. People see the 5%. Okay, you live in a nice house, you belong to a country club, whatever it is, but they don't see the 95%. What we talk about at Tiger is the 95%, and that's most of it. And you'd be shocked about all these successful people who've gone through bankruptcies, who've gone through divorces, whose kids have gone through rehab, who are going through major health issues themselves. And by talking about it, it's cathartic and it's helpful, but it has to be done in a safe environment. So that's why I'm a huge fan of Tiger.
Yeah. Ron, the first one to thank you. Everyone check out, despite Ron shying you away from it, go to Diamond. I'm kidding with you. DiamondWealthStrategies.com. Learn more. There is a podcast page. Check them out on YouTube. And, just think about, Ron, I want everyone to think about what's your North Star and some of what you talk about giving to others and helping others accomplish what they want. So, Ron, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.